quite like this idea that every parent seems to believe that they've got to have their baby trained to sleep, and we seem to have this disconnect of, like you said at the beginning, of what is normal and what's expected. And is it possible that it's just related to, we're living in 2022 now, and the idea of what a parent, caring for a child is very different? Or is it that we're trying to do too much, and that parents are just so overtired that they focus on, well, if I can get my baby to sleep, I'll be fine?
Well, there's so much that you can say about sleep training. I mean, it's obviously another example of parents being manipulated for the glory of the dollar or pound or whatever you want to call it. It's another way of making money off of parents' anxieties and concerns, and also their needs, because people are stretched very thin. And there's a huge market for sleep training in places where maternity leave is not very lengthy, or parental leave is insufficient, etc. But there's also this kind of whole historical idea about the way babies ought to behave and the way in which society has to shape the behavior of babies, which is to not bother their parents. We had this whole era of scientific baby care in the 1920s and 30s, when parents were led to believe that their job was to create, compliant, independent, self-reliant children, and that things like picking your baby up when it cries, or responding to it too quickly, or attending to it in the night, all created these clingy, dependent children that were never going to be able to leave their mother's apron strings, and blah, 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 blah. And, there's just this historical cultural narrative in sort of Northern Europe and the US, or the places in the US where people came from Northern Europe, that is about creating independence. There was a paper written about this from Germany in the 90s called The Cult of Independence, which was all about, creating these kind of children via techniques such as sleep training. So there's a lot of kind of historical baggage still floating around from that era in our societies. And so because parents have heard all of this stuff from their own parents and grandparents, etc., they believe it. They think that it's all true. But, Cecília will tell us that if you look cross-culturally at other societies, they all think we're mad.
It's a cultural invention by the same people, by the same elites in the late 19th century. I've tracked it down with others. We have some wonderful quotes about, people, the founder of American pediatrics, my favorite, Emmett Holt, and I have become quite close over the years, when he talked about essentially letting babies cry because he invented a circular argument about how they don't actually need to be fed. So first he had to establish the fact that they don't need to be fed or have human contact, and then to justify that and say, well, then they clearly can't be crying for something that they don't actually need. I mean, it's a completely circular argument. In the late 19th century, obviously these circulating ideas are not just his, but in the cultural waters, in these same kind of elite circles, who again are relying on other people already to take care of those babies. So it's not necessarily contact even with the mother. Sometimes we're talking about servants who would have actually slept next to that baby, and sometimes would have also nursed the baby. So as we move into the 20th century, and we have a complete takeoff of the scientific parenting, modernity, ideas about sort of capitalism, industrial ways of modern scientific ways of doing everything, not just infant care, that's colliding with things like, servants are becoming expensive for the elites. Middle class people can't really afford those kind of servants. And so they end up, putting those babies into a separate room with no one. And then, during that time, you have the acceleration of, books about sleep problems that emerge out of nowhere. So I think sleep training, is a solution to a problem that was created by these kinds of ideas that were not aligned with anything to do with, how human infants behave, or what they need. And then, of course, fueled by profits.